How are you going to kick this thing out of here? How are you going to get rid of the mycotoxins and the mold that are causing you brain fry? How are you going to move them out of your house? How are you going to move them out of your body? That's the plan you need to have. So the different kinds of tests all have their pros and cons, as you can imagine. So Emma is a test that's put out by a company called Real Labs. There are pros and cons to this test. This tests common mycotoxins that cause damage to your health, and it also tests for mold spores. And I would say that no test is perfect. And I don't have the data on how specific this test is. I can't give you that data. I can tell you that the company is used by a lot of physicians and well respected. So it's definitely worth checking out to consider doing this. These are the people that I used the first time that I went through my house and I was testing for mycotoxins in my house. Very helpful because what was in my house matched what was in my body. And so we had a pretty good idea that part of why I was sick had to do with the fact that we had mycotoxins in our house. The good part was that part of it was in my kitchen, so I got to get my kitchen remodeled, and that was a real bonus. The other test that you can get done, and this is probably one of the more common ones that's out there, it's called an URMI. Sounds like, these all sound like Elmo's cousins, Emma and Ermi and Elmo. But Ermi is a test where you do a dust sample. Both of these are dust samples. You collect dust and put them in a sample kit and send them off. I'm going to show you how to do an Ermi in just a second. So the way you do an URMI, so the thing with an URMI is it's a DNA sample of the dust in your house. You can take a sample from a vacuum bag. There are really specific instructions of how to do this. The company I've used, again, I have no association with, is called Myometrics, M-Y-O Metrics online. You can check them out. I followed their instructions and took a sample and tested. You can do a sample for just the 5 top ones, or you can do a sample for like 26, I think, different species. Pros and cons of the URMI. Okay, so the URMI is not necessarily telling you what is active right now. It's telling you what the history of your building has been in terms of mold incursions, and it's telling you what DNA strands you have left in your house. It gives you a general idea of what's going on. It's not going to tell you exactly for sure what's happening. One of the ways to get around and understand that some of the things that are going to show up on this test are completely benign. They're just normal molds that are part of life. You want to have them in your garden. You want to have them to help you grow your vegetables. We need to have them in our life. But there are some that when they're in their other ones, like Stachybotrys or like, the other one, because I still have mold in my brain, Catonium. Those are super toxic and you don't want them in your home. So if you have any amount of those, that can be concerning. So you're going to get a big broad stroke of what's going on in your space. One of the other things that can be confusing about this is, well, you test your whole house. How do you know where the problem is? One of the ways that you can get around this is you can do more than one test. And this is what I've done historically. Every time I've tested my house and when I test my family members' houses, I do it by layer. So we have a 3-story house. So I do a different story for each test. It's more expensive in the front end, but frankly, it's so much less expensive in the back end because you can find out like, oh, the problem's really in the basement. Like we're fine on the top floor, but the basement needs to be handled, which means that how you decide how you're going to remediate, how much stuff you got to get rid of, all of those things are so much easier if you do it space by space. If you're in an apartment and you're wondering, which room might be the problem, you might want to do that. But honestly, if it's a small apartment, I wouldn't bother. Honestly, the airflow is going to be, you're going to have so much you know, it's gonna be spreading so well through the airflow that honestly, I would just do one test for an apartment and see what your results are. The third test that you can do is something called an Agar Plate. So Agar Plate. So Agar Plates are pretty easy to get just online. You can purchase them, or through medical or science supply store. You can get Agar Plates. You can use these Agar plates in different ways. They're just little gel plates. I don't have one here, but basically they're pretty much like this little holder for my teacup. They're about this size. And one of the ways that you can test this is you can just take the cover off and place it somewhere above waist height and leave it there for an hour. You put the lid back on. You wrap it in foil, you stick it in a plastic bag, and you leave it for 5 days and let it incubate at room temperature. And then you open it up. And that's when you get to find out how many colonies you have of mold spores in your space. If you have 1 or 2, that's kind of considered normal, honestly. But if that whole plate is covered, or 3/4 of it is covered, and there's a lot of stuff growing out, then you probably have a bigger issue and something you want to deal with. The pro of this Agar Plate is it's really inexpensive. It's super easy. You can do it, you can do it yourself, and you can retest really easily. So you can remediate and then you can retest and do the same thing and get a comparison. The drawback is that it's not very specific. You have no idea what that mold is, like no idea, unless you culture it out. So it really doesn't tell you if it's just a benign kind of mold from, you were out gardening that day and you happen to have more in your hair that flung out and hit that plate that day, or if it's something that's really affecting your health. Another way you can use these Agar plates is you can actually swab your own sinus tissues. You can take a sterile swab and roll it up in your sinuses, careful not to poke too high, and then you can roll it out on the Agar plate and grow it out and see. I know there's some doctors who do this in their clinics to get an idea of the toxic of the mold and spore load in the sinuses. I personally find it too not specific enough to not be helpful for the way that I practice medicine, but it can be helpful for some. Now I want to go back to tell you how it is that you can do an URMI test here. And this, frankly, is all the high-tech equipment you need. You need a Ziploc bag, you need some gloves, and you need a Swifter thing. This is literally just a Swifter from, I bought a box of Swifters at the grocery store. And you're going to put your gloves on, and you're going to take this little thing and fold it over, and you're going to collect dust from high up, again, above waist height, throughout the space that you want to get. And every time you move to a different space, you just fold the cloth over to a different place, and then you stick it back in here with your requisition, with the form from Myometrics, and mail it off. And voila, in 5 days you get the result. It's pretty dang cool, to be honest. So these are some simple ways that you can test your own home to get an idea of what your base level is. But what if you're sick and you're wondering, how is it that I can test my body? Well, the way you can do that, you can test your body is a couple different ways. One, you can test your body through doing a urine test. I highly recommend this, actually. I think, and what you're testing is mycotoxins. So remember, the mycotoxins are the byproducts of mold. These are the ones, that's really what's causing the health problems in your body. You want to understand what your body burden is. Some things to be aware of with the urine test. There are 2 companies I know of that do them at this time. One is Great Plains Laboratory. The other one is Real Time Labs. I suggest that you do a sauna before you take the test if you can. Some people recommend taking glutathione before you take it to provoke it, to pull it out of your tissues. Like any toxin, your body is always trying to protect you. It's holding toxins into your fat cells, into your joints, into your brain, into your liver, into your thyroid, into your organs to protect you from that toxic load. And you might need to do something to kind of pull it out so you get to a better idea of your full body burden. There's no test that's 100% accurate, and that's not always the fault of the lab that's doing the testing. Sometimes it's because our body is holding on to toxins. I recently did a mycotoxin test for myself, and something that I know that I'm having contact to did not show up on the test. And when I talked to the doctors at that facility, what they said that they notice is with that particular mycotoxin, it's ketonium, with that particular mycotoxin, what they found is that the body holds on to it, holds on to it, holds on to it, holds on to it until it's really ready to release it, and then it all comes out. So right now I'm in my own personal journey of releasing a bunch of mycotoxins because I got reinfected in this past year. So highly recommend the urine test if you're able to do that. There are some blood and serum tests that you can do. Sometimes those are easier to cover with your health insurance using your primary care provider. And there's a whole series of tests that you can do that really, they're not specific tests for mycotoxins or specific tests for mold, but they do look at your body's inflammation levels. They're looking at patterns of how your body might be reacting or overreacting to things. And there's a series of about 6 different tests that you can run for that. So highly recommend doing this, because the truth is that when you have correlation between home body and your symptoms, then it's really easy to do the next thing, which is to move into your step 3, you've done step 1, you figured out there's a problem. Step 2 is you're doing some testing and some assessment. Step 3 is what's your personal power kit going to be like? How are you going to kick this thing out of here? How are you going to get rid of the mycotoxins and the mold that are causing you brain fry? How are you going to move them out of your house? How are you going to move them out of your body? That's the plan you need to have. And the more data you have, the more it's easier to convince yourself and your loved ones and your bank account that it's time to invest, and you need to focus some time, energy, and money to get rid of this stuff. When we come to and which kind of leads me to one of the real challenges and mistakes that a lot of people make when it comes to remediating mold and mycotoxins out of your body and your home, is that you let the mold and the mycotoxins rule you. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that this may sound super strange to you, but the truth is that once we are taken over by other critters, whether they're parasites or mold or mycotoxins, this kind of thing, it makes it harder and harder and harder and harder for us, for our brains to latch on and realize that we have to get rid of them. They want to stay, and it's almost like they've got little mind control things, and they come in and they tell you to eat sugar to feed them, and they tell you to not worry about all the mold that's in your car or in your house, or to do something else besides remediate your space. So I really need to tell this to you because it is hard to get rid of it. I cannot tell you how many very smart physicians I talk to who have had the exact same experience that I have had, where we keep putting off doing our remediation and our taking care of our mold over and over again, even though we know better. I don't want this to happen to you, which is partly why I'm coming on and talking to you about this, because I want you to understand that once you decide once you realize that this is an issue for you, getting your care plan together is going to be super essential and helpful for you. So how is it that you can do remediation? We're going to talk about that next, and check it out. I'm doing a whole series on mold and walking you through real time as I'm going through this process. If you're struggling with your energy and you're wondering why you're so tired, mold may be part of what's going on with you. I guide people into experiencing more energy and more vitality, and my wheelhouse is helping people with dealing with chronic fatigue and complex illness like ME, fibromyalgia. So reach out if you'd like to get some support with that. There are 5 root causes to chronic fatigue, and mold is a subset of one of those root causes, but it's a big one. Toxic exposure can definitely affect your energy, and that's what we're talking about right now, is just one subset of one of those root causes. And so if you're curious what your root cause of chronic fatigue is, then check out the quiz and see what it is, and ping me back if you've got questions for me. I'd love to hear from you. I'm so excited that you're here with us. Dr. Jenny Tufenkian here, reminding you to have a great day.